General Williams's champagne glass shattered when he saw me at the New Year's Eve gala. His body snapped to attention and he declared, "Ma'am, Commandant Thompson? Marine Corps?" In that moment, my family realized the daughter they'd banned from their celebration was actually the highest-ranking officer in the United States Marine Corps. They hung the Christmas stockings in perfect order. Sarah's name embroidered in gold thread. Mom and Dad's matching red velvet. Even one for Bella, the family dog. But mine wasn't there. For the third year running, there was no stocking for Victoria. No place setting for New Year's dinner. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. No invitation to family traditions I'd once helped create. That December morning, as I watched my sister Sarah post photos of their complete family holiday preparations on social media, I realized they'd finally succeeded in erasing me entirely. The daughter who'd, quote, brought shame to the Thompson name was no longer welcome at family gatherings. My mother's voice still echoed in my mind from our last conversation. "Victoria, until you get your life together and stop embarrassing this family, you're not welcome at our celebrations. We've told everyone you're traveling for work. It's easier than explaining your situation." My father had been more direct. "You've had 3 years to prove yourself, and all you've done is disappoint us further. Sarah's building a real career in the Marines. We don't even know what you do anymore." What they didn't know, what they'd refused to learn despite every hint I'd tried to give them, was who I really was. I'm Victoria Thompson. I'm 35 years old. And my family spent 5 years telling me I was a disgrace to the military, while I climbed to the highest position in the United States Marine Corps. The Thompson family had always been about appearances. My father, a successful attorney in Charleston, South Carolina, built his reputation on image and achievement. My mother, a former debutante turned social coordinator, measured success by what could be announced at country club gatherings. They lived in a world where accomplishments were only valuable if they could be displayed, discussed, and used to elevate the family's status. Sarah fit their expectations perfectly. She'd graduated from the Citadel with honors, commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Marines, and was currently serving as a captain at Marine Corps Base Quantico. She was the poster child for military excellence, photogenic, articulate, and serving in a role that was easy to explain at dinner parties. "Our daughter is a Marine captain," my mother would tell anyone who'd listen. "She's stationed at Quantico, working in logistics coordination. We're so proud of her service." Me? I was the family's dark secret. The daughter who'd joined the Marines but couldn't cut it in a normal assignment. The one who'd disappeared into some classified nonsense and couldn't even tell them where she worked or what she did. The military failure who'd somehow stayed in the service for 15 years without achieving anything they could brag about. They assumed I was stuck in some dead-end intelligence position, probably analyzing paperwork in a windowless office somewhere. When I couldn't attend family events due to work commitments, they interpreted it as evidence of my professional insignificance. When I couldn't discuss my assignments, they saw it as proof that I had nothing worth discussing. The truth was infinitely more complex and completely invisible to them. While Sarah was learning to manage supply chains, I was learning to manage global military strategies. While she was coordinating training exercises, I was coordinating international defense policies. While she was following orders from colonels and generals, I was giving orders that those same generals implemented without question. For 5 years, I'd tried to hint at my actual position without violating security protocols. I had mentioned meetings at the Pentagon, referenced consultations with Joint Chiefs, and spoke vaguely about quote, policy development responsibilities. But my family heard only what they wanted to hear. Empty boasting from a daughter trying to make her mediocre career sound important. They'd convinced themselves that my security clearance requirements were just bureaucratic nonsense, that my inability to discuss specifics meant there were no specifics worth discussing. They saw my modest lifestyle and assumed it reflected a modest salary, never understanding that true power often operates quietly. The final break came last Christmas when my father publicly introduced me to his law partners as our other daughter, the one who works for the government in some capacity. The dismissive tone, the casual erasure of 15 years of service, the complete inability to see my worth, it shattered something fundamental between us. I stopped trying to maintain the relationship after that. If they wanted to believe I was a failure, I'd let them believe it. The call that changed everything came on December 28th at 0630 hours. I was reviewing briefing materials for the upcoming Joint Chiefs meeting when my personal phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Hey Vic, are you really not coming to New Year's? Mom's telling everyone you're deployed overseas again, Dad's making jokes about how you probably can't get leave approved because you're not important enough. It's getting weird." I stared at the message, feeling something cold settle in my chest. For 3 years, I'd accepted their version of events, that I was unwelcome because I'd somehow failed to meet their standards. But seeing it spelled out in Sarah's text, watching them actively lie about my absence to save face, crystallized something I'd been trying to ignore. They weren't just disappointed in me, they were ashamed of me. Ashamed enough to fabricate stories rather than admit their daughter existed. My phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. "Victoria, did you get my text?" "I got it. Listen, I know things have been tense with Mom and Dad, but this is getting ridiculous. Mrs. Patterson asked me yesterday if you'd been dishonorably discharged, because no one ever sees you anymore. I had to make up some story about you being stationed in Germany." Sarah's voice carried genuine concern, but also frustration. She'd been caught in the middle of our family's dysfunction for years, fielding questions about her mysterious sister while having no real answers to give. "What exactly did Dad say?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. He was talking to his golf buddies about military service, bragging about how I'm stationed at Quantico. "Someone asked about you, and he said..." She paused. "He said you were probably stuck doing paperwork at some base nobody's heard of, and that's why you never get leave for important family events." The irony was suffocating. I'd spent the previous week in meetings with defense ministers from 6 allied nations. I'd briefed the Secretary of Defense on readiness assessments that would shape military policy for the next decade. I'd signed authorizations that deployed thousands of Marines to strategic positions around the globe. And my father thought I couldn't get approved for a 3-day leave. "Sarah," I said carefully, "what would you say if I told you Dad's assumptions about my career were wrong?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if I could get leave any time I wanted? What if I just chose not to come home?" The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. "Victoria," she said finally, "are you telling me you've been deliberately staying away?" "I'm telling you that Mom and Dad made it very clear I wasn't welcome unless I could meet their standards for success, so I stopped trying to convince them I had." "But you're still in the Marines, you're still serving, that has to count for something." "Apparently not." Another pause. "Vic, I don't understand what's happening here, but I know Mom and Dad are wrong about you. I've always known it. You were the smartest person in our family, and you just disappeared. Into the military, into whatever classified stuff you do that you can never talk about. And what do you think I do, Sarah? Honestly, I think you do something way more important than you're allowed to tell us. But I also think you've gotten so good at keeping secrets that you've forgotten how to be part of a family." Her words hit harder than I expected. Sarah was right. I had gotten good at keeping secrets. So good that I'd started keeping them even when they weren't necessary. "The New Year's party," I said. "It's at the country club?" "Yeah, why?" "Black tie?" "Of course. Mom's been planning it for months. 300 guests, including some big military donor who's supposed to give a speech about supporting our troops. She's been name-dropping him for weeks." I felt a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. "What's his name?" "General something. Williams, I think?" Mom's beside herself with excitement about having a real general at her party. General Marcus Williams. My former deputy, now commanding general of Marine Corps Combat Development Command. A man who'd served under my command for 4 years and still called me ma'am in private conversations. "Sarah," I said, making a decision that would change everything, "I think I might attend after all." The moment I decided to attend my family's New Year's Eve gala, everything shifted. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't planning to hide. I wasn't going to pretend to be less than I was. I was going to let them see exactly who Victoria Thompson had become. Every cow. But first, I needed to understand what I was walking into. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Every cow. I called my aide, Staff Sergeant Martinez, and asked her to pull together everything she could find about the Charleston Country Club's New Year's Eve event. Within 2 hours, I had a complete guest list, seating arrangements, and a detailed schedule of events. General Williams was indeed the keynote speaker, scheduled to deliver remarks about the future of American military excellence at 2,100 hours. The guest list read like a who's who of Charleston's social elite, military contractors, and local politicians. My parents had outdone themselves. This wasn't just a party, it was a carefully orchestrated display of their social connections. More importantly, I recognized 8 names on the guest list as current or former military officers who would know exactly who I was. Colonel Patricia Hayes, Marine Corps Logistics Command. She'd briefed me on supply chain innovations just 6 months ago. Lieutenant Colonel David Chen, recently promoted after implementing recruitment strategies I'd personally approved. Major General Robert Sterling, who'd served as my liaison to Special Operations Command during the Syria crisis. My family's exclusive social gathering was about to become an impromptu military reunion. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I called my mother. "Victoria?" Her voice carried surprise and barely concealed irritation. "I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I was wondering about your New Year's Eve party. Sarah mentioned it's quite the event this year." "It is." Her tone became guarded. "Why?" "I thought I might attend." The silence that followed was so long, I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "Victoria," she said finally, "we've discussed this. The guest list is very carefully curated. These are important people, business leaders, military officials, respected members of the community. It's not appropriate for you to—" "To what, Mom?" "To embarrass us," she said bluntly. "We've told people you're overseas on assignment. If you show up looking like—" She paused, searching for the right words. "We just can't have any awkwardness." "What if I promised there wouldn't be any awkwardness?" "Victoria, I appreciate that you want to reconnect with the family, but this isn't the right venue. Perhaps we could arrange lunch sometime in the spring. Just the family. Somewhere private." The dismissal was complete and devastating. Even my desire to attend their party was being rejected as inappropriate. I wasn't just unwelcome. I was considered a potential source of embarrassment to be managed and contained. "Mom," I said carefully, "do you know who General Williams is?" "Of course I do. He's a very distinguished military leader. We're honored to have him speak at our event." "Have you researched his background? His current position?" "Your father handles the military connections. I just know he's very important." "Why?" "Just curious," I said. "I'll let you get back to your planning." "Victoria, you understand that you can't just show up, don't you? This is an invitation-only event with security protocols." "I understand perfectly." After hanging up, I sat in my Pentagon office, staring out at the Potomac River. My mother had just told me I couldn't attend a party that would be addressed by a man who reported to me. She'd dismissed my interest in attending an event where 8 of the guests had either served under my command or received direct orders from my office. The woman who'd spent 5 years calling me a military failure had just uninvited me from a gathering that was essentially a celebration of the institution I led. I picked up my secure line and dialed General Williams directly. "Commandant," he answered on the first ring. "I wasn't expecting to hear from you today. Marcus, I need a favor. And before you say yes, I should warn you. It's going to be the strangest request you've ever received from a superior officer." The conversation with General Williams revealed the depth of my family's misconceptions about my life. When I explained the situation, his initial response was stunned silence, followed by something close to outrage. "Ma'am, are you telling me that your family believes you're a low-ranking service member stuck in a dead-end position?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you, Marcus. But they live in Charleston. Your father's a prominent attorney. How have they not heard about your appointment?" It was covered in every major newspaper. Military Times ran a front-page story about the first female commandant in Marine Corps history. The question forced me to confront something I'd been avoiding for years. They don't read Military Times, they don't follow defense news, and when my appointment was announced, I was listed as V. Thompson from South Carolina. My father probably saw it and never made the connection. Jesus Christ, Williams muttered, forgetting protocol momentarily. Ma'am, with respect, your family has been ignoring one of the most significant military appointments in modern history, and that appointment is their own daughter? Apparently. What Williams didn't know, what I was only beginning to understand myself, was how deliberately my family had constructed their ignorance. It wasn't accidental oversight, it was willful blindness. Over the next 2 days, I conducted my own investigation into my family's version of my career. I started with social media, something I'd avoided for years due to security concerns. My mother's Facebook page was a monument to selective storytelling. Post after post celebrated Sarah's military milestones. Her promotion to captain had received 47 likes and 12 congratulatory comments. Her assignment to Quantico was featured in a photo album titled Our Marine Daughter's Success. Even her completion of the basic school had been documented with professional photos and proud family commentary. My own military career was completely absent from their digital narrative, not just downplayed, erased. According to my mother's social media presence, the Thompson family had one daughter in the Marines, and she was serving admirably at Quantico. I found evidence of active deception in a post from 18 months ago. A family friend had commented on one of Sarah's photos. "What about Victoria? Isn't she in the Marines too?" My mother's response was chilling in its casualness. "Victoria tried the military for a while, but it didn't work out. She's in government work now. We prefer not to discuss it." The lie was so complete, so confident, that I wondered if my mother had actually convinced herself it was true. I dug deeper, searching local newspaper archives for any mention of military events my family had attended. The Charleston Post and Courier had covered several military appreciation galas over the past 5 years. In every photo I found my parents posed with various officers, smiling proudly as they discussed their daughter, the Marine captain. Never daughters. Always singular. Always Sarah. The pattern became clear when I found an interview my father had given to the Charleston Business Journal about supporting military families. He'd spoken at length about the sacrifices military parents make, the pride of having a child in uniform, the importance of community support for service members. "Our daughter Sarah represents the best of Marine Corps values," he'd said. "We couldn't be prouder of her service and her commitment to excellence." No mention of me. No acknowledgement that he had 2 daughters in uniform. In his version of reality, I simply didn't exist as a military family success story. The most damning evidence came from Sarah herself, though she didn't realize what she was revealing. I called her under the pretense of asking about family friends who might be attending the party. "You know," she said during our conversation, "it's funny how many people ask me about you. Major Peterson from the base was at Mom and Dad's anniversary party last year, and he kept asking whether you were related to quote, that Thompson who'd made headlines." Mom shut down the conversation pretty quickly. What did she say? She told him there must be some mistake, that you weren't involved in anything newsworthy. She was pretty firm about it. My family hadn't just failed to recognize my achievements, they'd actively denied them when presented with evidence. They'd chosen their narrative about me and defended it against facts that contradicted their assumptions. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My family's ignorance about my career wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, systematic, and so deeply entrenched that they'd rather deny reality than admit they'd been wrong about me for 5 years. Planning the revelation required the same strategic precision I brought to military operations. This wasn't just about exposing the truth, it was about ensuring maximum impact while maintaining the dignity of my position. I couldn't simply crash the party and demand recognition. I needed to orchestrate a moment that would be impossible to deny or dismiss. General Williams became my primary ally in the operation, though he struggled with the protocol implications. "Ma'am," he said during our second conversation, "I have to ask, are you certain this is the appropriate venue for clarifying your family's misunderstanding?" "Marcus, my family has spent 5 years telling Charleston's social elite that their military daughter is Sarah. while I've been erased from their narrative entirely. This isn't just personal anymore, it's professional. How many people in that room have heard my father dismiss military leadership capabilities because he thinks his own daughter couldn't succeed in the service? The question silenced him because we both knew the answer. My father's casual dismissal of my career had likely influenced business decisions, political opinions, and social attitudes about military competence. What do you need me to do? I need you to react naturally when you see me. Don't downplay the moment. Don't try to soften it for their sake. When you recognize the Commandant of the Marine Corps in that ballroom, I need every person in that room to understand exactly who they're looking at. The next ally I recruited was Colonel Patricia Hayes. Patricia had served as my logistics coordinator during the Afghanistan drawdown, and she understood both military protocol and social dynamics. More importantly, she was attending the party with her husband, a Charleston banker who moved in my parents' social circles. "Commandant," she said when I called, "I've been wondering when this situation would come to a head. My husband mentioned last year that your parents seemed confused about your service record." Confused is putting it diplomatically. "What's the plan?" I outlined my strategy. Patricia would arrive early and position herself strategically in the ballroom. When the moment came, she would provide backup confirmation of my identity and rank. Her presence would eliminate any possibility that Williams was mistaken or confused. "I have to ask," Patricia said, "what's your exit strategy? Once this happens, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. The genie's been trying to escape for 5 years. It's time to let it out." The most delicate ally to recruit was Sarah. I couldn't tell her everything without spoiling the impact, but I needed her positioned correctly when the revelation occurred. "Vic," she said when I called, "I've been thinking about our conversation, and I want to apologize for how Mom and Dad have been treating you. Whatever you do in the military, it's clearly important, and they should respect that. Thank you. That means more than you know. Are you really coming to the party?" "I am. But Sarah, I need you to promise me something. When I arrive, stay close to me. Don't let Mom or Dad pull you away for private conversations. Whatever happens, I need you to witness it." That sounds ominous. It's not ominous, it's just overdue. 2 days before the party, I made one final strategic decision. I contacted my aide and requested my dress blues. Not the everyday service uniform, but the full ceremonial dress uniform reserved for the most formal occasions. If I was going to reveal my identity, I would do it in proper military fashion. Staff Sergeant Martinez delivered the uniform personally, along with all my decorations and insignia of rank. As she laid out the components in my quarters, I saw her trying to suppress a smile. "Ma'am," she said, "permission to speak freely?" "Granted. This is going to be the most epic family reunion in military history." The night before the party, I called General Williams one final time to confirm our coordination. "Marcus, tomorrow night, when you see me in that ballroom, I want you to forget that we planned this. React as if you've been genuinely surprised to encounter your commanding officer at a social event." "Yes, ma'am." "And, Commandant, for what it's worth, I think your family is about to learn something they should have known years ago." "What's that?" "That they raised someone extraordinary, and they were too stubborn to see it." New Year's Eve arrived with the crisp precision of a military operation. Every detail had been rehearsed, every contingency planned, every ally positioned. I spent the morning in my Pentagon office, handling routine commandant duties, while my mind ran through the evening's choreography. At 1,400 hours, I received a text from Sarah. "Mom's been talking about the party all morning. She mentioned that someone important might ask about her military family connections. She's been rehearsing her speech about my service record." The irony was perfect. My mother was preparing to showcase her military family credentials to a room full of officers who knew exactly who the real military success story was. At 1,600 hours, I began the transformation. The dress blue uniform felt different this time, not like armor for battle, but like revelation clothing. Every ribbon, every decoration, every insignia carried the weight of 15 years of service my family had never acknowledged. The Marine Corps dress blue uniform is designed to command respect. The high collar, the gold buttons, the blood stripe running down the trousers. Every element communicates authority and honor. When worn properly, it's impossible to mistake the wearer for anything other than a highly decorated Marine. I hadn't worn my full dress blues in front of my family since my commissioning ceremony 15 years ago. Back then, they'd attended out of obligation and left early to avoid the reception. Tonight they would see those same blues, representing achievements they'd never imagined possible. The drive to Charleston took 3 hours, giving me time to mentally prepare for what was about to unfold. I'd planned operations that affected thousands of Marines, but this personal mission felt more consequential than any military engagement I'd ever coordinated. I arrived at the Charleston Country Club at 1945 hours, 15 minutes before the scheduled cocktail reception. The parking lot was already filled with luxury cars and uniformed drivers. Through the windows, I could see the glittering crowd of Charleston's elite, champagne glasses catching the light from crystal chandeliers. General Williams arrived exactly on schedule, stepping out of his staff car in his own dress blues. We'd agreed to maintain the pretense of coincidental attendance, so we didn't acknowledge each other in the parking lot. But I caught his slight nod of readiness as he walked toward the entrance. Colonel Hayes was already inside, positioned near the bar with a clear view of the main entrance. I spotted her through the window, elegant in her evening gown, chatting casually with other guests while maintaining situational awareness. She caught sight of me through the glass and gave an almost imperceptible smile. At exactly 2000 hours, I walked through the entrance of the Charleston Country Club. The doorman, a young man in formal attire, straightened unconsciously when he saw my uniform. "Good evening, ma'am. May I have your name for the guest list?" "Victoria Thompson." He scanned his tablet, frowning slightly. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't see that name on our list." "Check under Commandant Thompson," I said quietly. His eyes widened as he found the entry. "Ma'am, yes ma'am, welcome to the Charleston Country Club." I entered the ballroom and immediately located my family. My parents stood near the center of the room, holding court with a group of business leaders and their spouses. Sarah was positioned slightly behind them, beautiful in a navy evening gown, listening to my mother describe her military achievements to an appreciative audience. My father was mid-sentence when I stepped into the main ballroom, proud of our daughter's service at Quantico. The Marines really know how to develop leadership potential in young people. The room continued its elegant buzz of conversation, champagne glasses clinking, laughter mixing with classical music from the string quartet. Nobody had noticed me yet. I was just another uniformed officer attending a military appreciation event. But that was about to change. I began walking across the ballroom toward my family, each step measured and deliberate. The crowd parted naturally, as crowds always do when faced with someone moving with absolute purpose and authority. General Williams spotted me when I was halfway across the room. His champagne glass was already rising toward his lips when recognition hit him like lightning. The champagne glass slipped from General Williams's hand as if he'd been struck by lightning. The crystals shattered against the marble floor with a sound that cut through the elegant conversation like a gunshot. Every head in the immediate vicinity turned toward the commotion, but Williams was already moving. His entire body snapped to rigid military attention, with a precision that 15 years of service had made automatic. In a voice that carried the authority of battlefield commands, he declared, "Ma'am, Commandant Thompson, Marine Corps?" The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. The string quartet continued playing, but the music seemed suddenly distant and irrelevant. 200 of Charleston's most influential citizens turned to stare at the woman in dress blues, who had just been identified as the Commandant of the United States Marine Corps. My parents' faces went through a progression of emotions so rapid it was almost comical. Confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally, a kind of shocked horror, as they realized that the daughter they'd banned from their celebration was standing in their ballroom wearing the uniform of the highest-ranking Marine in the world. "Victoria?" My mother's voice cracked on my name as if she was seeing a ghost. "General Williams," I said, my voice carrying the natural command authority I'd suppressed for 3 years of family visits. "Good evening." Colonel Hayes materialized at my side with the fluid precision of someone who'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Commandant," she said with a slight smile, I wasn't expecting to see you here tonight." "Colonel Hayes," I replied, acknowledging her with a nod. "Charleston has become a surprisingly popular destination for Marine Corps leadership." The crowd was beginning to understand what they were witnessing. Major General Sterling, whom I recognized from the guest list, pushed through the gathering crowd and came to attention. "Ma'am, I had no idea you were attending this evening." "At ease, General," I said, and watched as 3 more senior officers in the crowd straightened and moved toward us with the magnetic pull that superior rank exerts on military personnel. My father found his voice first, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Commandant?" "Hello, Dad." Sarah stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Part awe, part confusion, and part something that might have been pride. She'd known I was more than our parents believed, but this revelation was clearly beyond anything she'd imagined. "Victoria," my mother said, her social instincts kicking in despite her shock. "You should have told us you were coming. We would have—" "Would have what, Mom?" I asked quietly. "Would have uninvited me, like you did 2 days ago? Would have told me I wasn't welcome because I might embarrass the family?" The words hung in the air like an accusation. Around us, the cream of Charleston society was listening to every syllable, watching the Thompson family's private dysfunction play out in public. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Williams said, his voice cutting through the tension with military efficiency. "May I present Commandant Victoria Thompson, 38th Commandant of the United States Marine Corps." The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop in a thunderstorm. "Niliki nai bayatsi." Then, like a wave breaking, the crowd began to move. Senior military officers stepped forward to pay their respects. Business leaders who'd spent years dismissing the Thompson family's other daughter suddenly realized they were in the presence of one of the most powerful military leaders in the world. My father's golf partner, the one who'd made jokes about my lack of importance, stood frozen with his mouth slightly open, clearly trying to reconcile the woman he'd been mocking with the figure of authority standing before him. "Ma'am," a voice said from behind me. I turned to see a young Marine lieutenant, probably attending as someone's guest. "Permission to say it's an honor to serve under your command?" "Permission granted, Lieutenant, and thank you." My parents watched this exchange with the dawning realization that their failure of a daughter commanded the respect and loyalty of every uniformed service member in the room. "Mom," Sarah said quietly, her voice cutting through the crowd noise, "I think we need to talk." The aftermath of the revelation unfolded like a carefully choreographed military operation, but one where my family was completely unprepared for their role. Within minutes of General Williams's announcement, the ballroom had transformed into an impromptu receiving line. Charleston's business elite, the same people who'd listened to my father dismiss my military career for years, now waited respectfully to meet the commandant. The shift in social dynamics was swift and absolute. Mrs. Patterson, the neighbor who'd asked Sarah about my dishonorable discharge, approached with obvious embarrassment. "Commandant Thompson," she said carefully, "I believe I owe you an apology. I may have repeated some misinformation about your service." "No apology necessary, Mrs. Patterson. People can only work with the information they're given." My pointed response wasn't lost on my parents, who stood nearby watching their carefully constructed narrative crumble in real time. Mayor Davidson, whom my father had courted for years as a political connection, bypassed my parents entirely and headed straight for me. "Commandant, what an honor. I had no idea Charleston was home to such distinguished military leadership. We must discuss having you speak at our Veterans Day ceremony." I watched my father's face as the mayor, someone he'd been trying to impress for a decade, essentially dismissed him in favor of the daughter he'd called a failure. The most devastating moment came when Senator Richardson arrived with his entourage. My parents had been bragging about their invitation to the senator's table for weeks, positioning it as evidence of their social importance. "Commandant Thompson," the senator said, extending his hand with the respect reserved for senior military leadership. "I serve on the Armed Services Committee. Your recent testimony on force readiness was exceptional." My father stepped forward, attempting to reclaim some relevance. "Senator, this is our daughter Victoria. We're so proud of her service." The senator looked genuinely confused. Mr. Thompson, with respect, the Commandant's achievements speak for themselves. Her leadership during the Afghanistan withdrawal alone secured her place in military history. My mother made a small sound that might have been a sob. For 3 years she'd been telling people I was overseas on insignificant assignments. The Afghanistan withdrawal, one of the most complex and scrutinized military operations in recent memory, had been conducted under my direct command. Sarah moved to my side, her face a mixture of pride and shock. "Vic," she whispered. "The Afghanistan withdrawal? That was you? Among other things." "Jesus Christ. And Mom and Dad thought you were filing paperwork somewhere." The crowd continued to flow around us, but the family drama was beginning to feel uncomfortably public. General Williams, reading the situation with military precision, approached our small group. "Commandant," he said formally, "perhaps we should move to a quieter location for family discussions?" I nodded gratefully. "That would be appropriate, General." He guided us toward a private dining room off the main ballroom, away from the curious eyes of Charleston society. My parents followed in stunned silence while Sarah stayed close to my side. Once the door closed behind us, the facade of public composure crumbled. "Victoria," my father said, his voice shaking. "We had no idea. How were we supposed to know?" "You could have asked," I replied simply. "In 3 years, neither of you ever asked what I actually did in the military. You just assumed I'd failed, and built your story around that assumption." My mother was crying now, but trying to hide it behind her champagne glass. "We told everyone you were overseas. We said you were on important assignments. You told Mrs. Patterson I'd been dishonorably discharged. You told the Business Journal that Sarah was your only military daughter. You uninvited me from tonight's event because you were embarrassed by my presence." The accusations hung in the air like smoke. Each one was accurate, and each one landed like a physical blow. "But you never corrected us," my father said weakly. "You never told us we were wrong." "I tried to tell you, Dad. For years I tried to hint at what I was doing. You didn't want to hear it. You'd already decided I was a disappointment, and anything that contradicted that narrative was dismissed." Sarah looked at our parents with something approaching disgust. "They're right, Mom and Dad. I've been watching this for years. Every time Vic tried to share anything about her work, you'd change the subject, or make jokes about government bureaucracy." The room fell silent, except for my mother's quiet crying and the distant sounds of the party continuing without us. The weeks following the New Year's Eve revelation felt like watching my family learn to breathe underwater. Everything they thought they knew about themselves, about me, about our shared history, had been fundamentally altered, and none of us quite knew how to navigate this new reality. My mother's first attempt at reconciliation came through Sarah, a carefully worded text message asking if I would consider having lunch to discuss the misunderstanding. The word choice was telling, misunderstanding, as if my 15-year military career had been a simple communication error rather than deliberate dismissal. I agreed to meet them at a quiet restaurant in downtown Charleston, away from the social circles that had witnessed our family drama. When I arrived in civilian clothes, I watched my parents struggle to reconcile the woman in a simple sweater with the uniformed commandant they'd seen at the country club. "Victoria," my father began carefully, "we want you to know that we're proud of your achievements. We always have been." The revisionist history was breathtaking in its audacity. "Dad," I said quietly, 3 weeks ago you told Mrs. Patterson that I probably couldn't get leave approved because I wasn't important enough. That's not pride. That's humiliation." My mother reached across the table as if to take my hand, then thought better of it. "We didn't understand the nature of your work. The security requirements, the classified aspects. Mom, you didn't want to understand. When I mentioned meetings at the Pentagon, you assumed I was exaggerating. When I couldn't discuss my assignments, you decided that meant they weren't worth discussing." Sarah, who had become an unexpected ally in family honesty, leaned forward. "They're right, Mom and Dad. I've been thinking about this since the party. Vic tried to tell us things, and we just didn't listen." The conversation that followed was unlike anything in our family's history. For the first time, my parents were forced to confront the systematic way they'd erased me from their narrative. The social media posts that featured only Sarah. The interviews where my father discussed having a daughter in the Marines while pretending I didn't exist. The years of telling people I was overseas when I was actually stationed an hour away. I need you to understand something, I said, looking directly at my father. For 3 years I've been attending meetings where senators and defense ministers ask about family support for military leadership. I've had to explain to foreign dignitaries why my own parents don't acknowledge my service. Do you have any idea what that feels like? The question hung in the air because, of course, they had no idea. They'd never imagined that their private family dysfunction could have professional implications at the highest levels of government. My father's transformation was the most dramatic. Within a month, his law office featured a prominent display case containing newspaper clippings about my appointment as commandant. He began introducing himself as the father of Commandant Thompson, with a pride that felt both genuine and desperate. My mother took a different approach, throwing herself into military family support organizations with the fervor of someone trying to atone for past mistakes. She organized charity events, volunteered at veteran centers, and spoke publicly about the importance of understanding military families. She's overcompensating, Sarah observed during one of our regular phone calls, but at least she's trying. The most significant change was in my relationship with Sarah. The revelation had shifted our dynamic from older sister/younger sister to something approaching professional colleagues. She began asking serious questions about military leadership, seeking mentorship that went beyond family obligations. I used to resent living in your shadow, she admitted during one conversation. Now I realize I was never in your shadow. I just couldn't see how bright your light was. 6 months after the country club incident, I received an invitation that would have been unthinkable before. My parents wanted to host a formal dinner in my honor, inviting Charleston's military and political leadership to properly celebrate my achievements. It's their way of trying to make up for lost time, Sarah explained. They want to do publicly what they should have done privately years ago. I agreed to attend, not because I needed their validation anymore, but because I understood that healing required allowing people the chance to do better once they knew better. 2 years later, I stand in the same Pentagon office where I first learned that my family believed I was a failure. But everything has changed. The relationship that once caused me pain has become a source of strength, not just for me, but for countless military families who've heard our story. The dinner my parents hosted in my honor became an annual tradition, but it evolved into something larger than family reconciliation. The Charleston Military Appreciation Gala now raises funds for veteran transition programs and has become a model for community military engagement. My mother chairs the organizing committee with the same social precision she once used to exclude me from family events. We want to make sure no military family experiences what ours did, she told a reporter last year. Sometimes the people closest to us are the hardest to see clearly. My father's law practice now specializes in military family legal services, pro bono work that helps veterans navigate complex benefit systems and family courts. He speaks regularly about the legal challenges facing military families, drawing from our experience to advocate for policy changes. I spent years misunderstanding my own daughter, he said during a recent conference on military family support. If a father can completely miss his child's achievements, imagine what civilian employers and institutions might be missing. The most profound change has been in Sarah's career trajectory. Our reconciliation opened doors for her that neither of us anticipated. She's now serving as a liaison between Marine Corps leadership and family support services, using our story as a bridge between military culture and civilian understanding. People need to hear about families like ours, she told me during her promotion ceremony to Major. Families that got it wrong but figured out how to get it right. But the real legacy of that New Year's Eve revelation extends far beyond our family. The story has become a case study in military leadership programs, highlighting the challenges faced by service members whose achievements can't be easily explained or displayed. Last month, I spoke at the Naval War College about leadership in classified environments. A young female officer approached me afterward with tears in her eyes. "Ma'am," she said, "my family thinks I work in supply logistics. They have no idea I've been coordinating counterterrorism operations for 3 years. How do you balance family relationships with security requirements?" I gave her the same advice I now give to dozens of military leaders facing similar challenges. You can't force people to understand what you can't tell them, but you can insist they respect what they can see: your character, your dedication, your service. The Pentagon has implemented new family support protocols partially based on recommendations that emerged from studying cases like mine. Military families now receive better guidance on discussing classified careers, and leadership training includes modules on family communication challenges. General Williams, now retired, serves on the advisory board for a foundation that supports military families dealing with similar disconnects. The Commandant's story, he often says, taught us that our most classified operations sometimes create our most personal casualties. My relationship with my parents will never be what it might have been if they'd understood my worth from the beginning. But it's become something perhaps more valuable, a testament to the possibility of change, growth, and redemption even after years of damage. During our last family dinner, my father raised his glass in a toast that would have been unimaginable 5 years ago. To Victoria, who taught us that a family's greatest honor comes not from the recognition we give our children, but from the recognition they earn despite us. My mother added quietly, and to the lesson that love without understanding isn't really love at all. Today, a new family contacted me through the foundation. Their son is a Navy SEAL whose parents think he's a failed musician living off military welfare. The pattern is depressingly familiar, but now there's a roadmap for healing. My name is Victoria Thompson. I'm the Commandant of the Marine Corps. And every day, I work to ensure that no service member has to choose between serving their country and being understood by their family. Some battles are won in foreign lands. Others are won at dinner tables. Both require the same courage, the same persistence, and the same refusal to surrender. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.